So, had a weird thing happen yesterday, Paul.
Okay.
My wife looked at me and said, "What are you going to talk about on your podcast tomorrow?" And this is like when you're watching a movie and somebody breaks the fourth wall. Like
Yeah.
my wife was just
So what
trying
were
to
you,
have
what were you doing when this came up?
we were just chatting. She was just trying to be a part of my career or something. And she's like, "I'm going to read your book soon." I'm like, "Wow."
Oh, shit, what?
Yeah.
See, my response to that would have been after a considered pause.
Mhm.
I would have been like,
Who are you?
why?
Well, actually,
You know.
even better, what I told her was like, "There's an audiobook so you could just listen to it."
Sure.
And then she looked at me and she goes, "I don't have to pay for it, do I?"
Oof.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways,
No. And no.
she looked at me and she was like, "You should just talk about Apple tomorrow."
Just talk about Apple.
Yeah.
Why? What have
Well,
they done?
and then I was like, whatever. Then we started talking about food or something. But it actually did bring up something that I think is relatively worth.
Brad, listen, I can't be clear enough about this. Your wife is not setting the agenda for this podcast. Okay. I love the woman. I appreciate that she puts up with you on a daily basis.
It's going to get real weird when we start talking about vacuums because we bought a new one.
Okay.
But in this picture, I think is perfect. So, Paul, I think it's very easy to make the argument that Microsoft and Apple are friends and they don't compete in anything. Let me
That's
explain.
not strictly true. But,
No, it's not by the line true. But
yeah, okay. I guess the way to put it is if you look at the majority of the ways in which Apple makes money,
Mhm.
and then you look at the majority of the ways in which Microsoft makes money, there is no intersection there at all.
Yep, both
That
of
the
these
two
companies.
circles, it's like
Yep.
those, what do you call that diagram where the two
Yep.
circles overlap? There's a little sliver in there in the middle.
Mhm.
That's like Surface PCs would be in there with MacBooks.
And that's
And well, technically, I mean, they both sell cloud storage for consumers.
come on.
Right?
Nobody.
No, I no, no. I'm just technically. I know.
People,
I know.
I'm going to interject. People buy iCloud because they're duped into doing it because they don't know any better.
Look. We all go to business with our own models. just, I'm just trying. I'm trying to think of something.
Yeah.
I mean, technically, they are part of the same conversation.
Yes.
In other words, even if you bought an iPhone,
Mhm.
and you're like, I want to back up my photos, blah, blah, blah. You could have a conversation. We'd say, okay, well, Apple has this thing,
Mhm.
but so does Google, so does Amazon, so does Microsoft.
Yep.
I agree, though. If you want to back up your phone, which you do, you got to use iCloud storage. And I believe that their storage tiers are specifically oriented to ensure that you have to upgrade
Yeah.
to store all your backups.
Yeah. But I mean, both companies could lop off their PC hardware business and the impact bottom line would be marginal.
Yeah, I agree.
And so it was it's a lot of people used to say, it's Microsoft versus Apple, but Microsoft and Apple in a minute would team up to figure out a way to knock Google off this planet in a second.
Well, okay, that's interesting. I would say, look, in the history of both companies, there have been periods of time where one of them was very jealous of the other and sought to outdo the other and whatever. The complication here is that Google is 80% of the mobile market. Microsoft actually needs them.
Yeah.
Microsoft in the current vibe of the company, kumbaya, partner with everyone, we're all friends, would be more likely to partner with both of these companies than to team up with one against the other. Unless, I guess, maybe Apple offered them something lucrative in return. But I can't imagine what that might be. Anyway, okay, but sorry, you're working on a premise.
No, it's really just that Apple and Microsoft are much better friends than they are enemies. And
Did your wife put this idea in your head? I'm just curious.
Kind of, but not really. But then I just started thinking about it. I was actually looking at my grass this morning because I'm waiting on a bunch of fertilizer to show up, and I'm sure some FBI agents wondering.
Everyone waiting for this show to start was waiting for fertilizer to show up, Brad. But please.
And I was just looking at it. I was like, Apple and Microsoft they don't compete. They don't. Their products don't overlap really in any meaningful way.
Yeah, I mean, that said, I mean, MacBook and Surface are maybe the one glaring exception.
But
I'm trying to figure out which is like the smaller market compared to the mothership. I mean, they're probably both about the same. I don't know. I mean, Surface is a much smaller business than Mac, but compared to the overall revenues of the company, they may be roughly comparable from a percentage standpoint or something. I don't know.
Yep. Until Apple goes into AR business and wipes HoloLens off the planet, then we have other.
Well, I've spent a lot of this week fawning over HoloLens too. You might have witnessed the most embarrassing interview of my life Wednesday on Windows Weekly, in which I had nothing but I had no questions for the poor woman. I only had praise, and it was a low point for journalism, I would say. But
we've gotten pretty lower than that. But go on.
Okay, fair enough. Low point for me on Windows Weekly, anyway. But but the rationale behind it, the reason it happened, I guess, is when Sony, my head is like all over the place. When Apple and Google collectively came out with AR technologies in their mobile platforms, I'm sure I wrote something. In fact, I should go look it up. That basically said, okay, HoloLens is dead. Like they're screwed. And the reason they're screwed is because everyone carries these mobile devices. And when you bring something like that to the masses, that's how it takes off. Plus, you have those I always use the museum example. A little kid is in a museum looking at a dinosaur skeleton, holds up their phone or their iPad, and they see what the dinosaur would have looked like in real life. And I think those things are really cool and really obvious for normal people to understand, why AR is cool. But you know what? In watching the HoloLens 2, the presentation, the announcement, and then more important, talking to this woman the other day from Dynamics, who works on the mixed reality apps at Microsoft. She said something really interesting that I think drives home the point, which is that the reason HoloLens works is because you wear it in your head and you're not holding anything in your hands, and that and I think it's the reason Apple is themselves working on glasses or whatever, because for this thing to be really valuable, you need to be able to use your hands, like when you're holding the device in your two hands, which you would be usually, or maybe one hand with a phone, you are by definition not interacting with anything. You're just viewing. It's a consumption experience. But for the creators, and I mean literal creators, the architects, the car designers, the guys who are doing like the plumbing on giant infrastructure and have to figure out which part went bad or whatever, and they're working with this 3D model in real space. You need something with more fidelity. You need something that has this ability where it's just you're wearing it and interacting with your hands. And so I used to really think that, really thought this, that the emergence of AR and mobile was going to kill HoloLens. And now I think they're going to coexist. Yeah. And Microsoft has put a lot of their consumption AR experiences on mobile too, right? Remember the demonstration in the past, this would have been a couple of years ago, maybe a year and a half ago, where probably Ford, they brought up, I think it was Ford, the car maker. They were showing how a designer using HoloLens could walk around the car and tweak it and do all this other stuff. But then they had guys with mixed reality headsets on who were just kind of viewing it so they could see what it looked like. And it was and still be sort of 3D or whatever. It actually makes more sense to use a tablet because you could all be in the same room, all talking to each other, walking around the same, not really their car, and still viewing it in 3D space, right? Right in the room. So I think they're going to coexist. Yeah. If that makes sense. I don't know.
I mean, it makes sense. I mean, Microsoft's going to have a certain amount of lead, especially in the enterprise space, before other products come out. Apple typically does not target the enterprise. Google, waffles a little bit between both.
Well, yes, I was, before I dismiss that, I would say, listen, one of the reasons the iPhone was so successful is that CEOs and C-level executives at companies, when this thing first came out, went to their ID departments and said, get me one of those phones. And they were like, I can't do that. It doesn't go to our enterprise systems. And they were like, I don't care. I don't care. That's the phone I'm using. And it really drove iPhone into the enterprise. If Apple is able to come out with AR glasses that look like glasses, and obviously you could put the iPhone in your pocket and still have the use of your hands. That could be a game changer in the same way that the iPhone was. So I'll just hold that as like the asterisk. You never know.
Sure.
And you should never count out Apple. But what you said is essentially correct. Apple is probably not going to target the enterprise with this device, right? They're going to aim it at consumers. But, sometimes when stuff is good enough, the usage kind of drives itself.
Yeah. Well, yeah, if that's what people are bringing into the office, a company's not going to go out of their way to buy more hardware.
Can I make a recommendation, by the way?
What?
If your wife is going to do this to us, I think it is important that she be forced to watch the episode and all of the episode.
I think so too.
You know, like I think that should be the minimum bar.
Yeah. I don't think she's going to watch it.
Okay.
And I would be very surprised if she continues to talk about
to
these
make
things.
recommendations. She's
Because-
like, here's the agenda I came up with for this week.
Because we're on episode 590 something,
Awesome.
and this is the first.
This is the first time, right? So you're saying once every 500 and something episodes, she may come up with a. Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. My wife wrote a post on our site. You know.
Yeah, I think you got to keep them happy. So.
Plus, you got to go with the what do you call it? The graft aspect of our lives. You know. I guess.
In other sad news, if you will, I'm actually a little bummed that Intel is killing off the compute card. It was such a good idea, but never really caught on.
I had to look it up because I when I saw that, I think I saw it on Twitter, wherever I saw it, the headline, I was like, oh man. I had kind of forgotten about it. You know, the for people who don't know what it is, it looks, imagine a credit card, but 3 times as thick. And it was a compute module that had CPU, memory, and storage and supporting chipsets and everything in this thing. And you could plug it into a dock and it would become a computer with, you know, screen, keyboard, mouse, whatever. Next Dock, those guys that made the Windows Phone based and Pi based and whatever else based, Raspberry Pi based, that is, laptop shell, made a version for the compute card, you know, and they opened it up for third parties to make their own computers based on this thing. I don't think any of them did. This happened 2 years ago. And looking it up, what I realized was they never updated it, right? So they put out it was a 7th gen Intel Core, whatever chipset. It's never been updated. And the reason we found out about this is because the Next Dock folks posted a blog post and said, hey, bad news, we've heard they're not going forward with this. And therefore, we're temporarily, or for now, we're going to halt development of this thing. And then Intel said, actually, yeah, we're done. You know, it's too bad.
It is.
It's a good idea.
The premise of it was, I mean, it was neat.
Yeah.
It's a little thing. You just slide in and bam, you get an upgrade. It was relatively easy. Although,
I mean, there are other things, right? We know they're like Kangaroo, I think was the name of that kind of small form factor computer. It's kind of cool. Even has a fingerprint reader on it.
Yep.
Intel and other companies sell USB key based computers. Arguably, you could do the same kind of thing, but there was something really cool about that credit card type form factor because it lent itself nicely to that thing where you could put it in your wallet and go to work and slide it into your computer, put it back in your wallet. It was like a smart card, you know. It seemed like a good idea. I'm surprised it didn't do better.
Yeah, which kind of, there was an ad that I saw on YouTube earlier, and I've known about this. There's like a Dell Alienware laptop that they pitch as being the most upgradable laptop ever.
Okay.
Which, with the news that Intel's killing this, maybe it's because they didn't give enough of an effort or whatever. I'm curious how often people actually do upgrade that, like the core components of their computers. That's
a good question. You know, Motorola, for example, is still makes them, but I don't think they've been successful. There's an innovative modular smartphone design with the Moto mods. Essential was originally going to be based on these modules you could plug onto the side of it. In that case, it's one of those things that seems like a really good idea, you know. And I think for some things, like you could make the argument for one of the things we've lost for the most part in the laptop world is the ability to upgrade things like the RAM or replace the battery. You know, replacing the battery on the fly is actually really useful because if you have a device that gets like 8 hours of battery life and you're flying to China or something, you have an extra battery, you just pop that in your bag and you potentially have enough juice to last for a lot of the trip or whatever. It's just a good idea. It's obviously a good idea, but to make these machines really thin and light, they've basically started sealing the cases, and that stuff is usually not accessible on most laptops today. You know, and I don't know. Do we need to be able to replace the CPU in a laptop? I don't know. Maybe not. But I think I don't remember who brought this up, but one of us raised the notion of like a modular Xbox, right? And that, to me, gets really interesting. I mean, what is the thing that needs to be replaced to keep this thing, to make it go to the next level? Like, what's the real difference between a Xbox One S and an Xbox One X, right? There's probably a couple things, right? But could that be on a modular, thing like we have in Surface Hub now? Yeah, I think so. I mean,
Sure,
obviously,
it's
something like
definitely doable. It's whether or not it's worth the additional
does it
cost, I
make
guess.
sense? Yes, and
Yeah.
would enough people upgrade? I mean, I think we're locked into a mindset where
Hmm.
modularity is not what people necessarily want, even though it would be better. They want the new thing. They could sell a sticker with it you can put on the outside or something.
Yeah.
Sega tried this. Remember the Genesis,
Yeah.
or
Was it
was it,
32X or what was it called?
yeah, 32X, and they also had like the CD. You could kind of stack all the stuff on it.
Hmm.
The Mega Drive or something.
Nintendo had
Um,
one too, actually, because I remember if you bought Perfect Dark,
mhm.
you would have to buy this
Oh,
little. It was like an additional. It was like extra RAM if you wanted to play. I
right,
think with
right, right,
four
right.
people, and you had to put it in the machine.
That's funny. I mean, there were a lot of things like this. And television had a plug-in voice module, a plug-in computer module, a plug-in Atari VCS emulator module. Um, you could kind of daisy chain them, I think. But if you wanted to play like B-17 Bomber and hear the guy talk, or well, actually to play the game at all, you had to have that voice synthesizer add-on. But yeah, those company's not really around anymore, is it?
Yeah.
I don't. Well, Mattel is, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, and then this is. I'm bringing this up for a specific reason. According
Mhm.
to US Gamer, Walmart is looking at getting
Nice.
into the game streaming stuff. My
Dude, sorry to interrupt, but
Yep.
I have to explain why that is so beautiful. I saw that headline this morning, and I spit coffee all over the place because yesterday something interrupted me, and I didn't tweet what I was going to tweet, which was, when you think about it, Google getting into the game streaming market makes no more sense than Walmart doing it. That was in my head yesterday. And then I saw that headline and I was like, you got to be kidding me. This is not like Onion headlines anymore. This is like the Onion becoming real life.
Yep.
It's crazy.
I would be willing to bet that if they do this, it's
Mhm.
built on like Microsoft services, or
Yeah.
or Google's for that matter. But I cannot
Oh,
imagine Walmart investing in building this thing from
I
scratch.
no, I listen. Someone asked me today in the Ask Paul post whether it would make more sense for Google to do this thing where they're kind of like the back end for other companies, like they could supply the infrastructure for Nintendo or Sony. And I was like, that's exactly what I think. And I also think they could do it for game makers of all sizes, Activision, EA, all the way down to the ID at Xbox type guys, although those guys go to Microsoft. But, I think that makes more sense. But as I was writing this response, which is really easy to write because it's like, yeah, I totally agree with you, is basically my response. What occurred to me was maybe that is the plan, right?
Mm-hmm.
That what Google is really doing right now by presenting an end user based service is proving that it can work, right? In other words, if you're Activision, right? Activision makes Call of Duty. You don't want to put Call of Duty on someone else's network if you don't have to. But actually, that's not a good example because they already do that. But like EA has their own kind of network
Yeah,
or whatever.
Origin and
Once they know it works, they could say, "Well, we'll bring Origin to your service, but we'll be the guys doing it, right? Like
Yeah.
we're not bringing our game. You can't get our game on your service, but you can get it through Origin on your service." And I think that might be, if not their fallback plan, then literally the point of this.
You ready
We're
for my
gonna,
conspiracy theory here?
Yeah.
This is not directly tied to that.
Mhm.
I bet that Microsoft is trying to get Steam to use xCloud.
Oh, geez. Right.
And my evidence for this,
Yeah.
again, conspiracy theory, no inside information, is that's why Halo is in Steam. You can get Master Chief Collection through Steam. And I bet that this is Microsoft saying, like, look, we can work together.
I wish they were that strategic.
Yeah.
My belief is that the reason they're doing it is because the new Microsoft is agreeable to everybody.
Yeah.
They had that insane person, Tim Sweeney, up on stage for HoloLens 2 for no reason whatsoever. That guy has been the most critical person on earth about Microsoft's online store, and particularly their store for gaming, and their desire to supposedly to kill all gaming. He was defending Steam back then, by the way. He hates Steam, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now he has his own store, I think the health of the gaming ecosystem requires Steam to be a thing, and I'm sure that's their primary thought there. But Yeah, that would be. Listen, I want a world where Microsoft reaches out to Google and gets their PWAs in the Windows Store, the Microsoft Store. I want a world where Microsoft reaches out to Steam and puts their first-party games on Steam so you can play them on the PC if that's how you want to do it. Like, that world to me is wonderful, right? For all of the joking I make about, the Kumbaya stuff. But doing it to, I don't know.
See, there's a part of me that I could see Microsoft looking at all of their efforts to make PC gaming some magical place. There was like Xbox Live for PC or whatever that program was called back in the Vista days.
Oh God, the games for Windows.
Games for Windows Live. That's what it was. They've been trying. They've put tons of games in the Windows Store.
Trying is a strong word, but
but it's never worked.
No.
If they could find a way to work with Steam to make Steam the PC game provider of choice for Microsoft games, they just own and go hog wild with Xbox and streaming. It kind of solves a problem for them if they can obviously make the business case for ripping games out of the Microsoft Store, probably, which is the only reason anyone goes there anyways, for the couple games that are there.
Yeah, fair. Yep. It's just funny. The game streaming thing is not viable right now. And yet it is already overflowing with companies that are eager to push each other aside to be there for you. And it kind of reminds me of a lot of things, but think about like streaming video services, it's the same thing right now. Like, do we seriously not have enough of these things? And now Apple's going to join in and, it's very strange to me. Everyone used to have an MP3 store. Everyone used to have actually a movie store as well. Remember, like Walmart had one, a digital store. I mean, like sometimes you would see like a retailer would buy an online service. I'm forgetting the names of these things now, but just to kind of get into the business, like it seems like every few years we hit on a new thing. Like right now it's game streaming. Like everyone is all of a sudden, this is the hot new thing. And of course the guys from OnLive must be kicking themselves. Like,
oh yeah, they had this and then.
Yeah. Like we invented this. Thanks.
Yeah. I don't know. It's crazy to think of that, but then also hearing the words that Microsoft and Nintendo announced this week that Xbox Live is coming to the Switch via Cuphead.
Yep. I mean, so remember that a few weeks back there were rumors Xbox Live was coming to mobile and Switch was the rumor. They announced mobile. And we're like, oh, that's weird. It seems like Switch should be part of that. I've always said this with the Switch. I mean, as good as this hardware is, like the one thing that Nintendo, it's the dark side of their kind of nostalgia-based, family-friendly strategy. They're just not there when it comes to the online service stuff, like Sony is, especially, and Microsoft is. And this is something I think they need help in. And they do, I think, need a partner like Microsoft or Google or Amazon or whoever to kind of make that happen. And I, in the same vein as your suggestion, I thought at that time, a few weeks ago, I was like, Microsoft should be talking to Nintendo, They do have a common enemy over there, right? Sony. And now what we find is that it was Microsoft that went to the game makers of Cuphead and said, hey, we want to get Xbox Live going over there. How about porting Cuphead? And we'll do that as the launch title, And that speaks to what you're talking about, an actual strategy that involves competing against someone, by partnering with another enemy of that company. I mean, it's to me, that makes a lot of sense, but it's not really the way the new Microsoft does things. Usually,
we'll see. There's a lot of it's unknowns, but I would say, and I think Microsoft probably understands this better than we do. There's a lot of potential for what they are building, and this is right in their playbook of build the service, then work with partners to resell it and all that good stuff. And maybe they just go, straight to Nintendo and say, hey, resell xCloud, but under your own banner. Bring your own games. And then they do the same to Steam, and then they do the same to everybody else that doesn't want to be on Amazon for whatever reason or on Google for whatever reason.
If Microsoft's efforts here are successful, they will have to make more money from selling the infrastructure to other companies to use than to sell their own stuff. There is no way that the majority of the money that goes through this thing is going to come from Microsoft, from Microsoft games and Xbox Live infrastructure.
I agree, because somebody asked me a really interesting question this morning, actually. They said, what games do you want to play on xCloud? And I was like, yeah, well, not really many, because I'd rather just play them on my Xbox.
Yeah. I mean, well, okay, but I don't commute to work, right? But if I did, if I could connect an Xbox controller to my phone and play Call of Duty on the train or something, like, if I was younger, I guess. I don't know. I mean, would I be interested in that? I mean, I think some people would.
Oh, there's definitely, I'm not saying there's not people, but it's more to your point that Microsoft would make infinitely more money if EA was using their service on the back end.
And let's face it. Yeah. All the hit games you can think of for the most part, whether it's on mobile, like a mobile specific game, like a Monument Valley kind of a thing, or Angry Birds or whatever, or if you look at PC/console gaming, things like Apex Legends or PUBG or Fortnite or whatever. Fortnite is a mobile crossover, whatever. Did not come from Microsoft or Sony or Nintendo, right? I mean, they came from some innovative small game publisher or whatever, and that's where you strike gold. Remember the correction of sorts that was in this past quarterly report from Microsoft on the Xbox side came from an unnamed game, Fortnite, that generated an unbelievable amount of revenue through Xbox Live that pumped up their service and software numbers. That was just happenstance. They were lucky that it happened. It had nothing to do with Microsoft.
Yep.
I think that's where the success is going to happen. And you want to be you want to be the plumbing.
Yeah, you really do.
Build
the technology and let other people play with it.
Yeah, because there'll be 99 games that float through there that do okay or fail or whatever. There's no risk to you, Microsoft, but there'll be the one that is a huge success story. And bonanza, you win big because of all the traffic going through there now.
Yep. You got anything else for today, Mr. Thurrott, before we head to New York next week?
Oh, God, right. I feel like there was something else, but I can't find it, so I guess not. I do. If you haven't seen it, there's a great interview with Gerard. I gotta butcher his French-ish last name, Metralier, probably, or whatever. I'm sorry, Gerard, but he is the CEO, executive vice president of Corel, and we had met with him in February to talk about Corel Draw Suite 2019 and all the stuff going on there. But we had been me and Mary Jo, had been meaning to talk to this guy since last summer about some Windows 10 developer stuff. And so I separated that out into its own interview. It's really long, goes into a lot of good stuff. If you're interested in this space at all, and not just as a developer, but kind of just as a Windows enthusiast, just kind of curious about the app platform and whether it matters and what Microsoft has done and how does it impact actual software developers, be sure to read it. It's really, really insightful on his part, I think, and worth reading.
Awesome.
What about you, Brad?
The only really thing I have on the agenda is that podcasting next week might be a bit goofed up because Paul and I, and Mary Jo for that matter, are going to be in New York. So if you don't see them happening certain days, you'll know why.
Yeah, so we're going to be busy all day, Monday and Tuesday. That doesn't mean we can't squeeze something in one or both days. I guess we'll see, but it's possible. There'll be zero. It's a 2 podcast over those days. We don't know yet.
So just be aware. With that, folks, that wraps it up for today. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you right back here sometime next week.